here. We are reading Exodus chapter 1, verses 1 through 22. We're beginning another journey through another book. Over the next 3 months, December, January, and February, we will be looking through the books of Exodus and Leviticus, and we are even in the midst of Christmas season. So we'll even be thinking about how the Exodus of the Israelites out of Egypt, out of slavery, on their way to the great promised land is actually kind of the same journey we're on to as Christians. We are on an exodus out of this life of death and sin and into our own promised land. We're marching on to Zion. We're marching on to the great heavenly city. We have our eternal home, and all of that was brought about because someone greater than Moses came to us. It's Jesus in the birth of a baby boy. As we will see as we look in Exodus, Moses was born and he was spared when the king of the land was trying to kill all the young babies. Same thing happened when Jesus was born as well. King Herod was trying to kill all the babies, trying to kill ultimately the Messiah that would free his people and save his people from their sins. As we read through the books of Exodus and Leviticus, we're going to have to go at a much faster pace. Otherwise, you're going to have 20 to 30 minutes of videos every single day. So we're going to be going through a lot quicker than we have through some of our New Testament books, but it should be a great joy. So I'm glad to have you along for the journey. Hope you jump in. I hope you stay with us. But what we see here on December 1st, that we need to crush the snake. If you remember, there was a promise that God gave to Eve. God said to Eve, when they left the Garden of Eden, God promised Eve and said, one of your children will crush the head of the serpent, will crush the head of Satan. And Satan is going to bruise that child's heel. And so we begin to see a picture of that. We know that that ultimate promise was fulfilled in Jesus. Jesus crushed the head of Satan when he died on the cross for our sins. But we're going to see some snake-crushing things happen in our reading today. And we're also going to see that the entire book of Exodus is all about crushing the head of Satan, the head of the snake. And we'll see that in just a second. So let's get into our reading. Verse 1, these are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob. Remember, they came to Egypt for refuge, for help, for protection. There was a great famine, and Joseph went ahead of them. And now all his brothers came, and all their family came. And now we have a listing of all those that came into Egypt. These are the names of the sons of Israel who came down to Egypt. Remember, Israel is also Jacob's name. Jacob's name was changed to Israel. The Lord changed his name to Israel. They came to Egypt with Jacob, each with his household. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher. All the descendants of Jacob were 70 persons. Joseph was already in Egypt. Then Joseph died, and all his brothers, and all that generation. But the people of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly. We see this great blessing of God being shown on the people of Israel. We see that they are being fruitful, they're growing, they're increasing in number. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong so that the land was filled with them. And this is going to be a threat to Pharaoh. And that's where we transition to in this chapter of Exodus. Pharaoh is going to oppress Israel. We're going to see this king fight against the people of God. Now, here is a famous picture of King Tut. Many of you probably know the story of this young boy king in Egypt. But I want you to take a close look at what the kings of Egypt would wear. Look at their hat. Look at their crown. So it's not like the European crowns that we think about oftentimes that would go on top of a king's head. Their headdress is a bit different. You see that little goatee he's got going on there. But do you see what's on the top of his head? Do you see that right there? What is that? That is a snake. So there was actually literally on the top of Pharaoh's head, there was a picture of a snake. And this is going to be very important as we see God defeat Pharaoh and defeat all of the so-called gods of Egypt. God is indeed going to crush Pharaoh's head, but not before Pharaoh attempts to do some damage to the Israelites. And remember, what is this power that is working behind Pharaoh? It's going to be even Satan himself, because we know from the promised from this promised people, from the Israelites will come the Messiah that will save the world. So Satan is going to attempt to exterminate the Israelites. Now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. You remember the previous Pharaoh under Joseph really liked Joseph and really pretty much made him prime minister, made him second in command. And he said to his people, "Behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. They're getting too large. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply. And if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land." Many are even thinking that this Pharaoh that came to power very well could have been one that rebelled against king beforehand. So this idea of a threat against him might be even more problematic. So verse 11, so he's threatened by them. So here's what he did. Therefore they set taskmasters over them to afflict them with heavy burdens. They are in slavery now, being beaten with terrible whips, forced to do excruciating work. And then they built for Pharaoh store cities, Pithom and Ramses. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied, and the more they spread abroad. Satan may try to crush his people, but it's not going to be successful. Satan may attempt to crush the church, but it won't be successful. We even saw that in the book of Acts, as Satan attempted to exterminate the church. Actually, it just became stronger. It just began to spread even more. Some early church fathers said that the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. It's actually the blood of the martyrs is actually what even helps spread the church. So as Satan attempts to put us down, it seems that God actually blesses the church and blesses his people and causes them to multiply. And the Egyptians were in dread of the people of Israel. They just couldn't get rid of them. So they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves and made their lives bitter with hard service and mortar and brick and in all kinds of work in all the field. In all their work, they ruthlessly made them work as slaves. Verse 15, then the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, we're going to come up with a different plan. Rather than just making them slaves, let's actually try to get rid of the children. One of the midwives named Shiphrah and the other Puah. When you serve as midwife to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a son, you shall kill him. So we see this pattern, this plan of extermination that Pharaoh is putting out. He is literally going to kill. He is literally wanting to have the women kill the children. If you remember back to that promise that God made to Eve, that one of your children will crush the head of the serpent, but the snake, is going to bruise his heel. And here we see this fighting between God's people and Satan's people. Satan is definitely trying to have his piece of meat from the Israelites, attempting to kill the men. But he says, if it's a daughter, she shall live. But the midwives feared God. This did not work. Sorry about that. This plan did not work. They feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them. This is an example for us to follow. Indeed, this is how the snake gets crushed. It is by obeying God rather than men. We take our orders from God. And when the laws of the land are in line with what God tells us, then that's a good thing, and it should be that way. But whenever the laws of the land contradict the laws of God, guess who we're supposed to obey? Anytime, anyway, you're supposed to obey God. You obey God rather than men. We must go ahead and get that in our minds now. We must go ahead and make a commitment that we will always do that in our hearts. We must do that before the laws say otherwise. We must always make a commitment to make God's word and make God's law our ultimate guiding principles, because they truly are the very words of God. So we see these wonderful women doing the wonderful work of God, protecting the seed, protecting the children, protecting the messianic line from which Jesus would come. And so they didn't do as Pharaoh said. And so the snake, the serpent, Satan himself did not have a victory over the children of God. And so they let the male children live. And as you could think, the king of Egypt is irritated, is upset, is so angry. He called the midwives and said to them, "Why have you done this?" And this is no small thing to be brought in front of Pharaoh's court. "Why have you done this? Why have you let the male children live?" The midwives said to Pharaoh, "Because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. You just don't understand. For they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them." Now, some people are saying the midwives are lying here to Pharaoh. And they are not telling the truth. I don't know if that's totally the case. They're telling a well-crafted statement here. They are saying they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them. We don't know exactly the details of what happened. Perhaps these two midwives even commanded all of them to tell the midwives, just don't go there. Make a plan that they can have their babies without these assistants. Whatever it is, they were standing against this evil command of Pharaoh to kill all the male children. And if you remember back to our Christmas story, this is exactly what happened when Jesus was born. When the wise men returned and Herod determined how old this special child, this baby Jesus would be, he then sent out his army to have all the male children that were 2 years and older killed. So the same thing was happening during Jesus' birth that happened during the time of Moses' birth. Moses is going to rescue the people of Israel out of slavery. Jesus, of course, being the greater Moses, as Hebrews says, rescues us from our lives of sin and fleshly slavery, the slavery to sin. So, what does God do with these midwives? God dealt well with them. It is always good for us to obey God rather than man. And the people multiplied and they grew very strong. Again, you see the stubborn blessing of God on the people of God. They multiplied and they grew very strong. Aren't you glad that God's blessing toward us is very stubborn, very strong, and it's going to persist? And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. Again, blessing them. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people. So we're going to go to plan C now. We tried to put them into slavery. Doesn't seem to be working. Now let's try to kill all the male children. Doesn't seem to be working. Okay, let's just throw them all in the river. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, every son that is born to the Hebrews, you shall cast into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live. Let's throw them all into the water, into a watery grave. Going to be making us think of Noah's Ark in the great flood that happened there. We're going to see Moses, of course, protected from this judgment on him. I pray that has been a blessing to you, and I pray you'll be looking for opportunities to see the snake crushed around you. Don't let Satan have a stronghold over your life. I pray that's been a blessing to you. I'll see you all in the next video.